Okay, quick question. Does anybody actively remember Zeke and Luther? Like, for real. Like, I know that most people say that, yeah, I watched all of these Disney XD shows and I remember all of them. But there are some shows that kind of just sometimes do seem to slip through your entire purview and you forget about them until somebody remembers them. So my main question is, who actively remembers Zeke and Luther? Because I know for a fact that I watched it and I watched it all, but there are some times that I actively forget some of the episodes, or honestly just forget that it existed entirely until I'm reminded by like scrolling through TikTok or something like that, where I see a clip of Zeke and Luther just out of nowhere. So we all know like Zeke and Luther came out during the prime time of Disney XD. During the time that all of these shows were popping and they were all getting so many high views, and Zeke and Luther was one of the highest performing shows in all honesty. The chaoticness, the fun of the show was strictly due to the fact that one, it was based around skateboarding. So a lot of guys really did love the show. Obviously, Disney XD was specifically tailored for the boy demographic, or tailored for to be a more edgy version of Disney Channel or whatever. So people would go onto Disney Channel for like the girls and the more kind-hearted stuff, which we all know all guys were still watching Disney Channel back then. But my main question is, Disney XD was one of the best things that Disney ever actively created, and Zeke and Luther was one of the best shows that they created. Obviously, there are a lot of times where I completely forget what was going on in Zeke and Luther just because it was so chaotic at times, and there's really some times where you have to be wondering, did this actually happen, or just was I just dreaming so much that, oh, I think that this happened, or I just imagined that this happened. There were a lot of chaotic and stupid scenes in this show, but it was one of those shows that you really just had to love. Obviously, it was about two guys that dreamed about skateboarding and just completely were skateboard enthusiasts through and through. And we just really saw a lot of goofiness and quirkiness throughout the entire show. This was a show, honestly, in my opinion, that kind of fell through the cracks at a point through Disney because of the fact that after it ended and as time went along, people honestly just stopped talking about it and it kind of fell through the cracks quite a bit. It's a show that, in my opinion, was really started to get lost through its time because there are a lot of shows that came out during that point that are like Lab Rats or Mighty Med or things that came out around that point where we were just like, okay, it might have ended so long ago, but you still have a lot of big fan base and you still have a lot of people still talking about it till this day. I know a lot of people that still talk about Lab Rats because it was one of the best shows in entirety, but you don't really get a lot of people specifically talking and commenting on Zeke and Luther. And I've been like scrolling through TikTok here and there, and I've been actually seeing like videos of specifically the two main actors from Zeke and Luther, specifically reconnecting or just seeing like these clips from Zeke and Luther because of the fact like for some reason it's finally deciding to resurface and come back to the purview of everybody's mind and everything else like that. But I honestly just wanted to make this video specifically talking about the fact that Zeke and Luther is easily one of my favorite shows to ever come out of Disney Channel. It was a show that was basically just two guys goofing around, skateboarding, with having a little sister that was honestly hilarious at times due to the fact that she was just basically always trying to play pranks on her siblings. And it was just one of those things where you really just started to have this very loving relationship with this show. It was one of those shows that you would probably watch at any point in time that you could. Anytime that it was airing, you would automatically sit down, watch, and your parents would just leave you alone because of the fact that if Disney XD was on, you're not moving anywhere anyways. So I'm just really glad that it was one of those things that you really could actively enjoy so much. Obviously, some of the main characters were extremely well loved and beloved in terms of the actual show, but we know some of the things that happened outside of the show and everything else like that. Specifically, some of the characters in Zeke and Luther that weren't even the main two were honestly considered to me better than the actual two main characters of Zeke and Luther. This specifically going in terms of Coco from Zeke and Luther, played by Daniel Curtis Lee, which is obviously the guy who played Cookie in Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. He was the funniest character in Ned's, and he was also the funniest character in Zeke and Luther. the way that he portrayed himself and the way that he was always just around was honestly usually hilarious because he would always come up with some kind of witty, fun remark. He would always just be there in the best positioning and the best timing and say exactly the best thing that you know would probably make you laugh. We obviously have Zeke, which was played by Hutch Dano, and Luther, that was played by Adam Hicks. We obviously know that a lot of things happened outside of Zeke and Luther, and that caused like things to like spiral after the show was done and everything else like that. And we obviously know that child actors and child stars and people like that usually play on Disney have literally hard times anyways. So we're not really going to discuss anything that happened outside of the show, but in terms of the actual show, you really just gotta love it. So I'm just really going to specifically talking about the fact that each of these characters were really, really interesting entirely. We have kids we have people like Ozzy from Zeke and Luther, which was this basically certified power walker that was also happened to be somehow a Giga Chad in all fairness. He was pulling girls left and right, but bro was the scrawniest character that you could even think of, the scrawniest character that you could even imagine. And he was just somehow able to pull out and pull these world class women, these world class people, and him and Cookie probably honestly could have deserved their own show and their own spin off entirely just due to the fact that those two were basically the funnest characters and the funniest characters of the show. But obviously, we know that didn't happen, so we're not really going to be discussing that in any format or any entirety. It was just a quick little thought process that I had. There were a lot of things going around in Disney XD that time that really kind of started to slip through the cracks, and a lot of people don't really remember. So, if it's any kind of show that came out through the late '90s or through the 2010s, even though obviously I'm 19 now. I'm about to be 20, so obviously I wasn't even born during the late 90s, but I watched a lot of shows that were even a little bit before my time because in all fairness, I grew up on antenna, so there were some times that I was watching Disney, but a majority of the time I was watching a little something called Cubo, which I don't know if many of you actually remember, but if you do, put that down in the comment section below. But we're just going to specifically mainly talk about a lot of Disney XD shows because a lot of them were just so peak and so gold that you really got to be talking about. Zeke and Luther just happens to be one that really took the cake, in my opinion. It was one of those shows that you kind of had to either love or never wanted to watch. It was nothing in the middle. If you didn't love it, you absolutely hated it for some weird reason, which I still don't know anyone to this day that absolutely just hated Zeke and Luther. I wouldn't understand if you hated Zeke and Luther because it wouldn't make no sense to hate Zeke and Luther because of the fact that it was just so phenomenal. So I honestly want to hear what you guys' opinions on some of these shows were. I know this is a fairly short video, but this is my first video actually trying to get into the groove of things and actually starting this channel. So please give me any of opinions that you guys would like to see specifically regarding around Zeke and Luther, regarding around any Disney XD show, regarding around any show that came out during our childhood or during those days. I'll be just happy to discuss any shows that came around that point because one, I love any of those shows and they are always something that were near and dear to my heart. So please put it down in the comments and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.